Most of the time, when you hear people talk about success, especially on social media, from what I've seen, you see after the fact, right? You see the glitz and the glamour and the fame and the money and all the success. Like it's a tangible thing. But a lot of the times, you don't see all the details and things that go on behind the scenes and like the grit, and somebody in the trenches. And as somebody who's dug my way out of the trenches, I'm still not in the clear. I'm very much still in it. But I can feel that moment that's going to lead to exponential growth. Like pieces are starting to line up, and you hear a lot about, compound interest, actions stacking up and creating an effect. And I can just feel like the dominoes starting to fall into place, right? So I just wanted to share my story, background, where I've come from, and where I want to go, whether it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes, just kind of off the cuff. And that said, I am a first generation Mexican American. So born in the United States, my folks are from Mexico. And throughout my childhood, I was fortunate to have a lot of people in my family who had side hustles and side businesses. My uncle and aunt owned a bakery. My dad, he used to weld security bars for businesses and residential because theft was a thing, right? People breaking into homes and whatnot. My uncle, who I drew a lot of inspiration from, he used to DJ and he started a ranch, and he just a lot of different things. So I've always seen the entrepreneurship run in my family, and it never occurred to me that that's something that I would want to do one day. I used to love to draw, was very creative, and trace comic books. And at one point, my mom was like, "Hey, you should be an architect," right? So I took that to heart, and I was like, "Yeah, I love drawing." Anyway, as I get to college, and I'm like, I freaking hate math. I love the creative aspect, but I hate the math. Um, and in between that time, I was doing lawns and doing just maintenance stuff for older folks in the neighborhood and the community that we lived in, which was cool. My dad would get me jobs with his friends who needed yard work, who owned some property. So I got a taste of that, right? Making money. Um, as I got older, I got my first job. I got my first job at a garden nursery. So doing irrigation, planting stuff, pulling weeds, the whole nine, and slowly started easing my way into the corporate world. At one point, I worked for a mattress store back in Austin, Texas. And in that mattress store, I learned a little bit about sales, but mostly I was the delivery guy, right? But he wanted to close up shop, do something new. So I had the opportunity to buy it for 50 grand. That time I was broke. I didn't have two nickels to rub together, so I couldn't buy it. Deal fell through, right? Um, Anyways, fast forward a little bit, I got my footing into software sales. So I did software sales for a while, and it was good because prior to that, I was making 30 grand a year working overtime, and I had a kid on the way. So I was like, hey, I have to figure out how to make more money to support my family and my kid, and I don't have to drive around in a hoopty. So my buddy got me a job in at Dell. And so instantly I went from 50K or 30K to 50K. And then I started learning the corporate ladder and how to play that game and move up the ranks, which I did. So I ended up moving up from 50K all the way up to like 150K before I quit. But during that time, I learned how to sell to executives, executive selling, and understanding that not everybody cares or sees an opportunity the same way. So you really have to understand the buyer. So a huge takeaway. I learned a lot. But during this time, like 3 years before I left that corporate world, I was like, man, I really want to start making money for myself and not have to show up and work for somebody. So I did all the research you could do, the internet, what's a good internet business. And I ended up getting into drop shipping. During my time with drop shipping, I probably dropped about $8,000. I stayed up endless nights, probably till 2 in the morning, um, learning about, products and how to test products, and then, you know, ordering stuff from Amazon, and going down the whole YouTube rabbit hole, and buying products, and going to Alibaba, and trying to record videos and edit, and just doing everything right. So eventually, through some mentorship, a paid mentorship program, I ended up finding a product that hit really hard. It was one of those kids' books that had invisible ink, and you can trace within the lines, and then the ink would dry and it would become invisible again, so the kid could go back and trace within the lines. Anyways, that hit really big. I made $350,000 in revenue. I probably took home, I'd say, about 60 grand. And when I got that 60 grand, I was like, man, I need to do something with this, right? I didn't want to spend it. I understood the value of it, but I mean, I thought I had it. I thought I was made. I was like, okay, this is it. I can retire. And then it fell through. But the whole idea was to do white glove treatment, right? Make the product my own, find a supplier in the US, and then money after that. Fortunately, it didn't work out. My Facebook review score dropped, and I got restricted from advertising on Facebook. So anyway, fast forward a little bit. I had a buddy that I used to work with at Chase Bank who introduced me to a dog training franchise. Okay. So I met with the franchise owners. I went to their headquarters, and it just looked like a really good business model. And for me, it didn't matter if I had to scoop dog shit for a year or scrub toilets for a year. The idea is that at some point I wanted to hire it out. Okay. So it didn't matter what it was for me. Now, ex-wife loved dogs. Me, I liked them, but I was more in love with the business model. So we pack up all our stuff from Austin, Texas, moved to Boise, Idaho with our 2 kids. And it's a grind. Like, before I moved to Boise, fortunately, it was a great franchise owners. And I'm booked up for a month. And booked up for a month for me is like, 10 to 15 dogs at my house. But that's the problem, right? It was in a house setting. So I had 10 to 15 dogs at my house at all times. And it was chaos, man, between that and trying to keep the marriage together, and then raising 2 kids. And so I'm doing all the things. I'm booking phone calls. I'm training dogs. I'm returning dogs to owners. I'm trying to figure out marketing. I'm just everything that an owner could do. Like, I remember that the bedroom was right next to the kennel space that we had. It was a den that we converted. And I remember it'd be 2:00 in the morning. Some dogs would be barking. I would literally get the smell of dog shit, and I had to go in there and clean up the kennel, vomit or whatever it was, take care of the dog, and then try and go back to bed and wake up at 5 in the morning to take my kids to school, make sure they get in on time. And just running around town, doing returns to customers' homes. Man, and I got this close to giving up at one point through all that chaos, because I couldn't find a brick and mortar building. Finally, I did, and that's a whole other story in itself. But fact is once I got into a building, it was trying to learn how to manage people and trust people. And I've never been a micromanager, so I trusted people a lot. And so during that process, I've really had to learn how to grow a thick skin, and buy back my time to do that. Right. So it's kind of, it has been like an up and down kind of scale, in the sense that once you think that something's good and you got it working, it's not. So that is constantly a learning curve. Anyway, so we get divorced, sell the house, and I'm like, dang, I'm still kind of working in the business with the ex-wife, and we get along great now, but I was like, I need to build cash flow outside of that. And I started going into this acquisition rabbit hole, and I acquired my first business, Poop 911, here in February of this year. And it was a huge transition and a leap of faith. And I always talk about calculated risk, like understanding what you're getting into, but sometimes you're not always going to have the answers, right? Like, and that's part of being a business owner, is not knowing how you're going to get to the result, but knowing that you're going to move mountains to figure out how to get there. And it is an extremely different type of feeling or type of chase when, if you don't figure it out, you don't eat, you know? So when you're in that situation, you do. Um, you figure out how to get there. And it can be a tedious process. It can be frustrating. It can be pretty much every emotion you can feel, on top of going through a divorce and having to figure out how to start over and learning who you are again, in a sense, you know? So acquired Poop 911, it is running itself. There was one day where I had to go in and get into the field, and I promised myself, I was like, Mario, when you acquire this business, you are not allowed to go in the field and scoop. Okay. Nothing against my technicians out there in the field. I love them to death. Without them, the business does not survive. But I was like, I'm buying this as a cash flowing opportunity or acquisition. I'm not buying another job, you know? So the one day that I had to go into the field, I must have did 18 yards, some commercial properties, and then my left wrist, which still hurts to this day, it just got injured. And I'm a gym rat. I love going to the gym. And so I've still had to learn how to modify around that. But I'm a huge believer in failing forward, you know? And while I did have to go one day, it is working out, it is functioning. I don't have to meet employees. I have my back end ops in the Philippines, which another story on that. Don, love him to death, is my brother from another mother. And then I have my field GM. So the dog training business, and the poop scooping business are running themselves. I'm more in charge of the marketing piece and trying to figure out how to scale them and grow them, right? Which I love doing. So I always had this goal that I wanted to retire by the time I was 40. I turned 40 last December. I'm about to turn 41 this December in 2025. And I can honestly say that I feel like I achieved my goal. Just because I don't have to work in the businesses anymore, right? So my new phase of life and what I've really started to understand is that I love helping people. Since I was in my early 20s, I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I used to listen to Zig Ziglar, and I forget all the other names that are out there, right? But that's how far back I go. And I just never been an extrovert like that. I don't feel comfortable getting in front of stages. Like, I remember back when I was in the software sales world, I had to do what we call lunch and learns and present, and I would always fumble over my words. Like, I would have to memorize things to the T, and that's just not who I am, you know? So I've had to really put in the repetitions and make myself uncomfortable and get into situations where I don't know how I'm going to function. And after this many years, after being able to get into networking groups, I'm starting to find my comfort zone, especially in front of the camera and tell my story. But what I'm getting to is my passion now is helping other people build generational wealth. And I know that every time I fall forward, and I'm learning about myself, I'm learning about people, and acquisition is the next step in that journey. So Lifetime Legacy Holdings, which I just got my jacket in today, my branding, and I'm super proud of it, is that brand, right? It's the brand that I'm building. And now when I go into networking meetings or events, I don't walk in with my dog training jacket, because I get tired of talking about dogs all the time. I'm not there to talk about dogs. I'm there to talk about how to build wealth. So my goal and my vision for this channel is to help people and inspire people, and not talk like I've made it, because I feel like even after you have quote unquote made it, you haven't, right? There's always a lesson learned, and I always want to grow. I always want to figure out how to get to that next level. And when you hear me talk in shorts or in the future and have videos out, I'm coming from that perspective, right? Somebody who is still in the trenches and wants to help people who are still in the trenches. So if you take anything away from this video, just remember to be consistent. Don't forget who you are. It's going to be a grind. Nobody's going to give anything to you. Sometimes you have to figure out how to try to get it yourself. Nonetheless, you can overcome everything and make the best or most out of your situation.